Today I wanted to build a Barbarian Archer, and I feel like we came up with something pretty neat, so let's check it out. Starting off, you can be a lot of different races, but I decided to go Goliath. And I mainly decided this because Goliaths who are carrying a big bow and are a Barbarian just sounded pretty sick as hell to me, so that's why I chose it, but I'm sure you can find many other reasons to choose different races. Mobility to allow kiting can be very strong. If you're choosing a mobility race, it's all about the hit and runs. As a Goliath, it's all about the get hit and run, which our reaction helps us out taking damage and reducing it, which is really good on a Barbarian who's raging because our damage reduction goes a longer way. And eventually we're going to be taking Ancestral Barbarian, which is pretty sick with Goliath because no matter who the enemy attacks, their damage can be reduced by our reaction. As for our stats, we're going to be going 13 in strength. This is to multi-class out of Barbarian. Then we're going to do 16 dex, 16 constitution, 13 wisdom, and dump the other two stats. We're going to get this by doing a +1/+1/+1. The reason we're going into 13 wisdom is so that at any point we can take the resilient wisdom feat and take care of our wisdom saving throws, which Barbarians are always going to appreciate. At level 1, we're going to be taking Barbarian right away, and an armored defense is particularly good in this build because we are focusing on dexterity more than strength, and dexterity plays into our AC more, so we're going to have a higher AC than normal. On top of that, we don't gain benefit from reckless attack the same way most Barbarians do, so they're not going to be attacking us at advantage nearly as often, so in some ways we are tankier than a normal Barbarian. Overall, we are a backline Barbarian who is just shooting arrows for damage and only really using our rage for damage resistance. For level 2, like I said before, reckless attack doesn't do much for us, but danger sense is really good here to round out our dexterity saving throws. At level 3, we pick up Ancestral Barbarian. Now, whenever we're raging on our first arrow hit, we mark the enemy and they now have disadvantage attacking anybody else besides us, as well as whoever gets hit by them, if it's not us, has resistance to that damage. Now, if you combine that with the fact that we are shooting them from a really long range, potentially, now what can they do? They either attack our allies at garbage numbers, or they have to approach us from a long distance. So it kind of puts them in a catch-22, and I really love how this synergizes with an Archer Barbarian. You wouldn't think an Archer Barbarian would be very good, but this actually works quite well. Ancestral Guardians is sick. It's definitely my favorite Barbarian, as you can probably tell from how many builds I do revolving around it. This whole build works particularly well if we have a strong front line. The weaker our front line, the weaker this build is. And this works particularly well if one of our allies on the front line has Sentinel, like extremely well. The first reason for this is when we mark them, now they can go towards us, and if they do so, they'll take an opportunity attack and potentially be held still. Okay, now that they're holding still, they're going to attack the person next to them, but they're going to be doing it at disadvantage, and our ally's going to have resistance to the damage. We synergize perfectly. This build is perfect for a buddy system build where if you have a good friend, they can do a cool Sentinel build, you do this build, and you guys can work really closely together to make your enemy's team an absolute nightmare. At level 4, I'm picking up Crossbow Expert. Crossbow Expert is going to give us a bonus action attack, and the reason an extra attack is so important for us is if we don't hit during our turn, we don't do our job. Our tanking relies on us getting at least one hit a turn. By having extra attack, we essentially double our chances of doing that. Not to mention that people are going to want to pressure us often, and Crossbow Expert allows us to be a melee archer when needed. Not to mention that it has a 30-foot range, just like our Spirit Shield does that we get at level 6. So it matches the kind of range we're going to want to be playing at, which is bouncing in and out of 30 feet. At level 5, we pick up our extra attack. And like I said before, every single time we get another attack, it just increases our chances of hitting that one time, which is the biggest job we have. We need to be hitting once per turn to be fulfilling our role. We're also going to get extra movement here, and like I said, we're going to be bouncing in and out of that 30-foot range, so extra movement really helps us do that. It's hard to overstate how important positioning is for this build. We need to be far enough away from our enemies that they can't rush us down, and close enough to our allies that we can provide spirit shields and attacks for them. So we really need to be paying close attention. Even 5 feet can matter, so this 10-foot extra movement can be a big deal in the long run. This level of positioning prowess is really where the most amount of skill comes in for this build. That if you are positionally unaware, you can find yourself not helping your team or debuffing your enemies, but if you're really good at position, you can find yourself balancing on this fine line between doing both of those perfectly where you can't be attacked and you're making it so they're having a hard time attacking your allies. Really cool how it all comes together. At level 6, Next, we get an extra rage, which is a big deal. Rage really turns this build from just being a mediocre archer to being fantastic, so the more rages we can do, the better. And on top of that, Spirit Shield, being able to reaction protect our allies from damage. On top of our marks, man, we are making our whole team so tanky just by existing and hitting people. Really amazing what we do. We are a powerful tank, but we are an archer at the same time. I just love this build. I love how it comes together. So here is a branching point for us at level 7. We can start going into fighter. 3 levels in fighter does quite a lot for us. First off, we get a fighting style, which is going to increase our 2-hit. As I've talked about many times, our job is to hit. Past that, we get action surge, which say we have a turn where we miss all 3 of our attacks. Now we can action surge to make sure we hit our final attack. And then we have Battle Master, who comes with precision attack. Dipping into fighter is all about making sure we are at least getting 1 hit per turn. And that's when we'll know when to spend our resources. If we don't get a hit in our turn, spend your resources. If you do get a hit, probably save those resources for later. This is a perfectly viable playstyle and a route you can go with this build. Alternatively, you can go rogue here. And what's really interesting with rogue and barbarian is barbarians do not scale well in damage from this point on, whereas rogues will continue scaling our damage. That 1 hit that we definitely need to land, rogues will continue scaling its damage. I chose rogue, but both are completely viable, completely amazing builds. On top of giving us a bunch of extra damage, rogue also gives us out of combat utility and in combat mobility. Cunning action combined with barbarian is a lot of extra movement, and maybe we get our hit in our first attack, and so we don't have to spend our bonus action attacking again. We can use it to gain superior positioning. At level 9, if I didn't take Crossbow Expert, I would have really considered Mastermind here for the bonus action help at 30 feet, would lean harder into the support format, but as it stands, I decided to go Phantom Rogue. A big part of that is the flavor, that we are this Ancestral Guardian Barbarian who's interacting with lost spirits, and then there's the Phantom Rogue who interacts with lost spirits. So I liked the combination of theme and think there's a lot of fun flavor things we can do there. But on top of that, a couple times a day, we can just do bonus extra damage. At level 10, I'm going to be bumping our dex. More AC and better to hit are both very important for us. If wisdom saves are continuing to be an issue at this point, you can instead take Resilient Wisdom. At level 11, you can take Uncanny Dodge, which has fantastic synergy with being a raging barbarian. You can have the damage twice. And considering that we have a build that tries to convince our enemies to attack us, you'll probably be able to use all your Goliath reductions on top of Uncanny Dodge. So moving on from level 11, at any point we can do that fighter dip I talked about beforehand to increase our 2 hit, but personally I'm going to just keep pushing rogue. Evasion plus danger sense absolutely nullifies dexterity saving throws. They just will never be a problem. With our resilient wisdom, we're going to have fantastic wisdom saves, fantastic dex saves, and just by being a barbarian, we're going to have fantastic constitution saves. So we cover our saves, and our AC is just going to continue getting more and more solid. Once again, we're not recklessly attacking, so our AC is also solid. So our physical and mental defenses are both really great. Once again, I just love how these flavors mesh. You can be interacting with your guardians while you're raging, but you can also be interacting with them outside by being this phantom rogue who can talk to the dead and whatnot. So there's a lot of fun roleplay to be had there, and I would build my story around these phantoms. Who were they in my past, and how are we interacting moving forward? I really like this build. It's fun to take a barbarian who's never really supposed to be an archer and make a pretty cool archer out of it. Ancestral Guardian's ability to tank for the whole team at a distance is awesome. And there's a lot of variations you can do on this build. You could go 3 in Barbarian to get the Ancestral Guardians, and then you could use a longbow and sharpshooter to attack from huge distances to get the mark off, instead of being a kind of close range build where you're focusing on your Spirit Shield as well. There was the Rogue path, there was the Fighter path, and there's even a couple more levels in Barbarian that you can take, though I wouldn't take any more than 8. The 9th level Barbarian really starts falling off. As mentioned before, I particularly like this build with a Sentinel Frontliner. Everything just comes together between those two marshals. And this build can really just nullify attack-based bosses, make them easy, but it does have a weakness against saved-based bosses. We're not going to protect our allies from someone who's just doing a lot of different wisdom saves or dexterity saves throughout the fight. We protect our allies from AC-type attackers, so we do have our weaknesses. Another weakness of ours is that we can't hit big groups of enemies. Swarms can overrun us. We can only mark 1 person per turn, so that is just something to keep in mind. But this has been my Barbarian Archer. What I'd like to hear is if you guys have some cool Barbarian Archer builds. Let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, I just hope you have yourselves a lovely day, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.